his very first move as the executive was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack. He signed his first move as the executive of the New York Knicks was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack.
Meet the man that ruined Carmelo Anthony's career. Now, if you watch this channel and you know me, you know I'm not a Carmelo Anthony fan at all, but if I'm being honest, Phil Jackson ruined his career. In 2014, Phil Jackson was basically signed as the Knicks president for about 5 years for $60 million, and at the time, of course, it seemed like a brilliant move. In Phil Jackson's playing days, he played for the Knicks. He's the greatest head coach of all time in many people's view. He coached Michael, Jeffrey, Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Scottie Pippen, Shaquille O'Neal. Of course, it seemed like a great move, but it didn't turn out to be. No one had anything negative to say about Phil Jackson coming there, but then he started making moves and everything went downhill for the Knicks, and especially Carmelo Anthony. After the Knicks made the playoffs and they were pretty competitive 3 out of the first 4 seasons with Mike Woodson and Mike D'Antoni, Phil Jackson made a questionable decision. He signed Derek Fisher as the new New York Knicks head coach, a guy that had zero coaching experience professionally. Now, to be fair, he tried to get Steve Kerr, another guy that really didn't coach professionally before that either, and Steve Kerr just turned it down. Luckily for Steve Kerr, because that was a disaster of a job, but he got Derek Fisher, and that really made everyone scratch their head. I mean, this is the New York Knicks and $1 billion franchise, one of the most popular franchises in sports, and they handed the keys over to Derek Fisher, a guy who just really brought drama to the team with Matt Barnes and all that stuff, and he really wasn't a great coach. Now, the reason I believe he did this is so he can run his own personal favorite style through Derek Fisher, because Derek Fisher played for him, and he can kind of use Derek Fisher like a puppet, kind of like Jerry Jones is with Jason Garrett if you watch football in the Dallas Cowboys. That's kind of what I believe he was doing. Phil Jackson made it very clear that he wanted to run a triangle offense, and that's exactly what they did. But the problem was he didn't have the players to run it with. When he was running with the Bulls with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and shooters like Steve Kerr, that actually worked because he had the complementary players to do it, and it was a way different age. When he was with the Lakers and he had Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Robert Horry, a bunch of complementary players around him, that actually worked. You can't bring that to a New York Knicks team with just an ISO player in Carmelo Anthony and a bunch of guys that we really couldn't even pronounce their full names. Needless to say, it didn't work. And they started the season 4-19, and of course the proud man Phil Jackson is he wouldn't take the blame, so he just blamed them and said the Knicks were developing a losing mentality. But later he did admit his brilliant quote-unquote plan wasn't working, and he fell flat on his face. That year the Knicks finished with the worst record in the league, or the second worst record in the league, and most importantly the worst record in New York Knicks franchise history. I mean, for Phil Jackson, that didn't look good, because the Knicks, they made the playoffs 3 out of the first 4 years, or 4 out of the first 5 years that Carmelo Anthony came there and he was there. So for him to come there and they just fall flat on their face that terribly, that makes Phil Jackson look extremely bad, and he was pretty much ruining the prime of Carmelo Anthony, or at least what was left of his prime, because he was already in his early 30s, but he still has some left in the tank. I think at that time, most people would still consider, Carmelo Anthony a top 10 player in the league at that time, at least. So you had a top 10 player on your team, and you pretty much were ruining the rest of his career. You got to remember, I'm not a big Carmelo Anthony fan, but for like the first 12, 13 seasons of his career, he made the playoffs every single season. I mean, that is extremely impressive, and I got to give him his props for that. The only good thing about that season is that the Knicks were able to steal a draft pick, and of course they got Kristaps Porzingis, and everybody bashed him for it, but it started to work out because Kristaps turned out to be a beast. So, you got to give Phil Jackson his props on that, because he saw that. But man, that first season, Phil Jackson just, he just trashed it. I mean, just to backtrack a little bit, around mid-season, he gave J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert basically to LeBron James for pretty much nothing. I mean, he just gifted it to him. And at the time, J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert, they were, a pretty dynamic duo for the Knicks. They weren't stars, but they had a pretty key role with Carmelo Anthony, and they worked pretty well. But to keep moving along, right after they got Kristaps Porzingis, and it was a pretty questionable decision at the time, but it turned out to be good. They traded away Tim Hardaway, one of their other promising players, and he turned out to be a pretty solid player in this league. So Phil Jackson clearly didn't know what he was doing. The 2016 season didn't go as bad as the previous one, but they didn't make the playoffs. They only won 32 games, and pretty much that wasted another one of Carmelo Anthony's primeful years. And Carmelo Anthony just wasn't the same because he didn't have the players around him. And, you know, in the Eastern Conference, he couldn't even make the playoffs or even come close. He wasn't playing in the West anymore, and the Eastern Conference wasn't that damn great. It was basically just LeBron James dominating everybody, and teams like the Pacers, the Raptors, teams like that. It wasn't really big dominating teams in the, the Eastern Conference. So the Knicks, they definitely could have been a valuable team to challenge LeBron at least. Now, on to the summer where everyone finally thought the Knicks would finally turn it around. The summer of 2016, when Phil Jackson got Derrick Rose, signed Joakim Noah to an awful $72 million contract, and it all turned out to be a big disaster. I'm not even gonna lie, even I thought, ooh, Derrick Rose, Carmelo Anthony, Kristaps Porzingis, Joakim Noah, this might work. But as we all know, it didn't. The team pretty much played terribly. Derrick Rose, he was disgusted with that triangle offense. It didn't suit him at all. Carmelo Anthony, I mean, he's an isolation type of player, and Phil Jackson was forcing that down his throat, and it just didn't work out because Phil Jackson was way too stubborn to realize it's a different era. And to add insult to injury, Phil Jackson constantly crucified Carmelo Anthony and just made it seem like it was all his fault. I mean, he even went as far as to say, man, we should just basically trade Carmelo Anthony or he'll be better off, somewhere else.
Able to win with him on the court at this time, and I think the direction with our team is that he is a player that would be better off somewhere else and using his talent somewhere where he can win or chase that championship. Right now we need players that are really active, can play every single play, defensively and offensively.
Who says that about their superstar that they already gave a massive contract to? He just made Carmelo Anthony seem so little, and he belittled him any chance he got. The Knicks and Carmelo Anthony in 2017 were just basically in like a weird situation where the Knicks, they wanted to trade Carmelo Anthony, but he had that no trade clause because he wasn't just going to get sent anywhere. They wasn't going to just dog him like, they do other players. So that was kind of smart on Carmelo Anthony's part, but it just didn't turn out. Even the team he got traded to was just a terrible fit. Now, I'm not giving, Carmelo Anthony a pass because, like I said, I think he's one of the more lazy superstars in this league, and he just really doesn't fit in too many spots. So I'm not giving him a pass, but Phil Jackson signing him, a real rigid coach that likes things his way, it just didn't work out, and it really affected Carmelo's career, or at least what was left of it. You can even look at the numbers. I'm not a stat guy, but if you look at the numbers, Carmelo Anthony in his first 4 or 5 seasons without Phil Jackson, he was averaging, or at least with the Knicks, he was averaging 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists on 45% from the field and 37% from deep. But after Phil Jackson arrived, he was averaging 22 points, only 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 43% from the field, 35% from deep, he just wasn't the same player. He was pretty, still decent, averaging 20 points. He's still Carmelo. He's one of the best offensive players we've ever seen, but his career just went down. It's just that simple. The triangle offense is just outdated, and it's just that simple. And Carmelo Anthony, he couldn't get with it, and he went to, the Thunder, and, that didn't work out. And he went to the Rockets, and that didn't work out, and now he's out of a job. Like I said, Phil Jackson, Carmelo Anthony is not my favorite player, but I believe his signing with the Knicks pretty much destroyed what was left of Carmelo Anthony's career. That's the video though, guys. Like I said, Carmelo Anthony is still out of a job. He only played 10 games this season, and no one really wants him. I think the Lakers are they might be eyeing him maybe for the future, for the rest of this year in the playoffs. I don't know, but he's not going to get a serious job with a serious role because I feel like he's had pretty much all his chances. He played with the Thunder, he played with the Rockets, couldn't fit in. Who's really going to sign Carmelo seriously as a contender? Probably not going to happen. So, like I said, Phil Jackson, it just didn't work out, and Carmelo's out of a job. Let me know what you guys think about this topic. I know it's probably a lot of Knicks fans that agree. Maybe you guys disagree. Let me know in the comments, guys. I'm gonna be here. I'm reading all the comments. Do all that great stuff. Follow all of my social media sites. That's extremely important. Do all of that important stuff, guys. And until next time, stay tuned.